Namaskar and good evening everyone. Today, as you all know, that we have assembled here for Dr. Meena Majumdar and Giribala Das Memorial Lecture under the Vivekananda Science Circle. As a customary of the Institute, at the very beginning, we would read out a very short life sketch of the duo. Dr. Meena Majumdar Memorial Lecture, born in October 1931, Srimati Meena Majumdar took her MSc degree in both pure and applied mathematics from the University of Calcutta and did research at Jadavpur University. Within 1.5 years, she was awarded the PhD degree by the Jadavpur University, but before the news came officially, she had already left this world. Taking Dr. Shuddhodhan Ghosh, head of the Department of Mathematics, Science College, as the ideal of her life, Dr. Meena Majumdar found joy in simple life and selfless service. She dedicated her life in constant pursuit of knowledge. Her deep love and reverence for her parents were ideal for her age. Although mathematics was her favorite subject, she was a lover of music and literature. She also wrote a few fine stories and poems. She was associated with the All India Radio and won a few medals for her talented performances. She passed away on 8th of July 1982 and was awarded PhD degree later in September of the same year. Dr. Meena Majumdar Memorial Lecture is instituted by her bereaved mother, Srimati Promila Majumdar. Giribala Das Memorial Lecture. Giribala Das was a religious woman. We are not aware about the date of birth of Srimati Giribala Das. Srimati Giribala Das died in the year 1934. Giribala Das Memorial Lecture was instituted by Sri Rotikanto Das in the memory of his mother, Giribala Das. Today, collectively, Dr. Meena Majumdar and Dr. Srimati Giribala Das Memorial Lecture would be delivered by Dr. Chandrima Saha, former Director and Professor of Eminence, National Institute of Immunology, New Delhi, on the subject, The Magic of Being Alive, the Story of Our Cell. I would also like to request to come on the stage Professor Shamol Lahiri. He heads the Vivekananda Science Circle, the part under which this lecture is being instituted, and we are having this lecture in the Shivananda Hall. Professor Lahiri would give a brief introduction to our speaker and also on the subject. After that, we would directly move on to the lecture, The Magic of Being Alive, the Story of Our Cells. Over to Professor Lahiri. Thank you. Namaskar.
Hello, yeah. I just now welcome all of you, all distinguished members of the audiences here, and to this particular lecture by a very eminent scientist and well recognized by the professional people. And I think I don't have to spend much time in introducing her to you, because you saw in the poster and other places briefly her qualifications. So just formality reasons, actually I will just read out a little bit. That already Shayak has mentioned that the title of the talk is Magic of Being Alive, the Story of Our Cell, which is a very, very relevant subject for the day, because bioscience is exploding and who knows what it holds in the future. And the speaker would be Dr. Chandrima Saha, received her PhD from IICB, Indian Institute of Chemical Biology. Then he has a lot of recognitions from various professional societies, like his FTWAS, FNA, FASC, and FNASC. But right now she is J.C. Bose Chair Distinguished Professor in IICB. You know, IICB means the Jadavpur one actually, which is quite well-known institute in Calcutta and the nation. She was immediate past president of the Indian National Science Academy, INSA I think, and former director and professor of eminence, National Institute of Immunology, New Delhi. And she was also a former J.C. Bose National Fellow. So she's extremely qualified to talk about the particular subject, and I'm sure the way she would be talking, it will be understandable to a wide cross-section of the audience. And so I would not take any more time. I will request Dr. Chandrima Shaha to come on the stage and give her lecture. Thank you. জলটা এখানে দেবো না ওখানেই থাকবে জলটা এখানে দেবো না ওখানেই থাকবে জলটা কোন থেকে নিয়ে আসছি খাওয়ার জল লাগবে এটা ইউজ করো
Thank you for your kind introduction, Dr. Lahiri. প্রথমেই আমি ধন্যবাদ জানাই রামকৃষ্ণ মিশন ইনস্টিটিউট অফ কালচারকে আমায় এখানে বলার সুযোগ করে দেবার জন্য। ধন্যবাদ জানাই স্বামী সুপর্ণানন্দ মহারাজজিকে আমায় আমন্ত্রণ দেবার জন্য, এবং ডক্টর শ্যামল লাহিড়িকে আবার ধন্যবাদ জানাই সব কিছু সুব্যবস্থা করে দেবার জন্য। আজকে আমার যে বিষয় কোষ, সেল, আমি ইংরেজিতেই বলবো, হয়তো বাংলা মিশিয়েও বলবো কিছুটা। আমাদের কিভাবে আমাদের সেল আমাদের বাঁচিয়ে রাখে এবং সেল রিসার্চ কোথায় যাচ্ছে এটা বলবো। তাহলে আমি এবার শুরু করি। এখানে আলোটা নিবোতে হবে। হ্যাঁ, আমরা যখন আমাদের চারপাশে দেখি, when we see all around us, we see an enormous diversity of life. See, whether it is the bacteria, which has about more than 35,000 species. I'm sure it is more than 35,000. We have not discovered all of them. Then the protozoa, then the invertebrates. এটা নিভিয়ে দিন, এটা নিভিয়ে দিন, এই আলোটা নিভিয়ে দিন। ক্যামেরাটা আসবে না তাহলে, কিসের ক্যামেরা? ভিডিও ক্যামেরা করছে ওটা। এটা তো একটু ফাজি দেখাচ্ছে। ঠিক আছে। So and these invertebrates, that means animals which do not have a vertebral column, they have more than 1 lakh species. Fishes, more than 30,000 species. Birds, about 10,000 species. And mammals, a group to which we belong to, has about more than 5,000 species. And plants have an enormous variety, more than 380,000 species. Now, all these many members of these species are now facing an extinction. অনেকেই লুপ্ত হয়ে যাচ্ছে, এবং এর মধ্যে একটা কোনো কমন থ্রেড আছে, unity in diversity. So historians, scientists and philosophers have debated about unity in diversity. And Swami Vivekananda has said that great lesson is that unity is behind all. The man, the cat, the dog, and the plant and the tree all come under more general concept of life. Again, all these, all beings and all materials come under one concept of existence, for we are all in it. So this is the concept, what he also alluded to, a concept of unity in diversity. But how are we connected? We are connected, all organisms are connected by a beautiful structure which is called the cell, jeta banglay kosh bole jake bola hoy. So the cell has a central brain, which is actually the nucleus. The nucleus contains the DNA. DNA, apnara mostly janen. DNA is actually not living. DNA contains the instruction to run our lives, and that is helped by the cell to translate the information that is in the DNA. So using the macromolecular machinery of the cell, the information of the DNA is actually transferred. And then each cell runs their own lives. They are units, they're sort of self-regulating semi-autonomous units. And all cells form an organ, and the organ is a part of the organism. So cells will coalesce together to form organs. So when did we first know about cell? So till about 17th century, cells were not known, even though some great minds have interpreted that we were consisting of smaller units, but nobody had an idea of the cell. So for each, if you look at discovery now, that for each discovery we almost have become dependent on technology. So in a small way, technology had to come before the cell could be seen. So cell was first seen by a gentleman called Robert Hooke, who was a brilliant man. He was a scientist, he was a painter, he was a town planner, and he was actually a polymath. And he was called the Leonardo da Vinci of England. So much so, he was such a the brilliant man. His brilliance was seen in all the things that he was doing. But he was he was so brilliant that he couldn't stay in one place at one time. So he was doing many, many things. So Robert Hooke actually made a microscope. And with that microscope, he looked at a section of a cork, and that cork section, if you can see here, it looked like this. So he was actually seeing some small chambers with walls around them, and he made this drawing and published this in his seminal book in 1665 called the Micrographia. So he was the first human to actually conceptualize a cell. And he coined the term cell here because he thought that it looked like, it sort of looked like rooms that monks stayed. And he called them cells because those were called cells. And that terminology has remained till today. So he was actually looking at the dead cells. He didn't see a live cell. So almost 18 years after his death, Antony van Leeuwenhoek, who was a Dutch gentleman, he first saw living cells with his tiny microscope, which was actually more powerful than Hooke's microscope. And he looked at bacteria, and he made exquisite descriptions of these and reported to the Royal Society of London. Even though he was not a scientist, he was a draper. He was actually looking at fibers of cloths with this microscope. He was recognized as a fellow of the Royal Society, which was a great honor to be given to a non-scientist. So his drawings, if you can look at the internet there, it's full of that his drawing books are on the internet. Exquisite drawings, I mean, so good. So he made the observations of how they were moving, whatever their trajectories of moving. So it was very interesting if you look at them. Now, for the next 150 years or so, it was cells, the concept of cell slowly was evolving. So in 1838, two friends, Matthias Schleiden and Theodor Schwann, they used to have coffee every day in the evening and discuss about life sciences. So they proposed the cell theory. What the cell theory said is that the cell is the fundamental unit of structure and function in all living organisms. All known living things are made up of one or more cells. All living cells arise from pre-existing cells by division. So cells cannot occur by themselves. They have to come from a pre-existing cell. So we are all coming from the ancient cell which occurred many, many billions of years ago. The activity of an organism depends on the total activity of independent cells. So this was the concept of cell theory. Now cell theory has now changed because of many inputs of modern biology. But let us see this only here for the time being. Now we start our life as a single cell. And this cell divides into 2 cells, 4 cells, 16 cells, and so on and so forth, so that an organism can grow. Now here, the cells have to make an important decision. The cells have to decide what cell to become, whether they want to become a heart cell, whether they want to become a lung cell. I mean, it is all programmed, whether they want to become a kidney cell. So a very interesting event happens here, which is selection of lineage. But that is another story, and that is a very interesting story, but that is not for today. Now, while the cells are actually growing here, the embryo is shaping up, there is a lot of events happening. One of them is stretching and pulling, then cell division and cell death, so which is happening. Now, how many cells actually are there in the human body? There are about 30 to 50 trillion cells. You can imagine the number of cells we have. And these cells actually are replenished by cell division, and similar number of cells die, cell death. Cell death is a process that is integral to our existence, and this is an area where I have worked for about 3 decades of how cells die. So both cell division and cell death has to be balanced for us to survive. As we speak today here now, your and my cells are dying and cells are being born, because if you look at the numbers, about 330 billion cells are replaced daily. So this is a constant process, and it is equivalent to about 1% of our cells. In 80 to 100 days, 30 trillion cells will have been replenished, which means that it's almost our entire body weight. But it doesn't happen equally among all cells. We have red blood cells which live only up to 120 days. And our lining of our gut lives less than a week. So the maximum turnover of cells is happening there. But other cells of the body are also having turnover. Other organs of the body are also having a turnover. So cell death is actually essential for keeping every person alive. So it's an integral part, it's a programmed death. And if we look at how cell death actually shapes us, you will see that cells at specific places has to die, which is also programmed, and die by a process called programmed cell death. And what we see is when a sculptor is actually sculpting a stone and bringing out a beautiful statue out of that stone, similarly cell death is bringing out our shape. So it is a very important part of our lives. But how do these cells die? What do we mean by programmed cell death? Programmed cell death actually means that we have an inbuilt program in our cells that is triggered due to stress or because it is programmed to die at a particular time. So what the cells do is they sort of divide themselves into small balls of cells, onekta balloon moto. But if they sort of burst, what do? They spill all the contents inside, and that causes problem with our body. So they don't break. So this is the beauty of the programmed cell death, which is also called apoptosis. So these balls, now what happens? These balls, they have broken down. What happens to these balls? Something has to happen, otherwise they will create problems. So the soldiers of our immune system, called the macrophages, they actually come in, they pick up these balls, take them in, and digest them, and release the regenerated material for reuse. So this is a very important process, and as I said, it is called apoptosis. But you will see, if you're looking at literature, sometimes cell death, apoptotic death, and programmed cell death is synonymously used, which is incorrect. Programmed cell death is the phenomena, and apoptosis is actually the process. So what happens if if apoptosis is deregulated? So cell death, if there is excessive cell death, AIDS can happen. In AIDS, which is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, one particular cell type of the immune cells, which is called CD4 plus positive T cell help, actually they die, and that's why the person is without an immune function, and so they have all kinds of diseases. Infertility can occur where germ cells die, and neurodegenerative diseases also occur when excessive cell death is there. And it is not only this. If cell death is diminished, then you get tumors, because for example, tumor cells divide very rapidly. So if cell death cannot keep pace with that, tumors are formed, and then autoimmunity can also occur where cells are not disposed of properly and they don't die. Autoimmunity can occur, and neurodegenerative diseases also occur, because when our brain is growing, in the sense that when the first circuitry of the brain is being laid, what happens is that a number of neurons has to die. If they do not die, the circuitry of the brain is not okay, and all kinds of neurodegenerative diseases may occur. So I will just give you one example of how cell death, it's a very interesting example, that when we are in the mother's womb, we have webs between our fingers. So that those cells have to die by programmed cell death for us to be able to wiggle our fingers. So that is one example I'm giving. This can happen. This happens throughout the body in many places. So you see what happens if these cells don't die. The fingers are joined. So these are the anomalies that are formed. So in summary, so far what I have said is that we have about 30 to 50 trillion cells in our body that evolved from one single cell. Cell balance is maintained by cell division and cell death. Cell death process is built in our cells and is called programmed cell death. I have already explained what programmed cell death is called, why it is called programmed. It is a neat form of death so that no inflammation is created. Deregulation of cell death leads to various deformities and diseases. That is what I have said so far. Now, how do we do research on our cells? Is mostly that we do either primary cells, which we culture from organs, we take out the cells from the organs, or we use cells which are cancerous and use them for various studies. So these are cancer cells in culture, these are neurons in culture. And we can do microscopy. Microscopy has actually improved by leaps and bounds. We can see the minutest details in the cells now when we use the electron microscope. There are other forms of microscopy. The electron microscope has become now scanning microscopy, other forms of microscopy that we use, atomic force, etc., that we can really see very nice details within the cell. Then the biochemistry, then the sequencing, and then fluorescence imaging that we can do. So I want to tell you a little story here about how valuable our cells can be, and they're very valuable commodities. So this woman, Henrietta Lacks, she died on October in 1951 of cervical cancer in Baltimore's Johns Hopkins Hospital. What was done, her tumor cells were removed from her, and at that point of time, scientists were actually trying to grow cells in test tube, and they were not successful. But when they took out her cells, they started growing very vigorously. And even in 73 years after her death, Cells keep growing in the laboratory, apparently immortal. They are called HeLa cells, Henrietta Lacks, HeLa cells. And more than 50 million tons of Henrietta cells have been grown since she died, and 110,000 papers have been published, and research with her cells have actually benefited many patients. So, unknowingly to her, she has contributed to medical research. Important discoveries where HeLa cells played a crucial role are Dr. Zohausen, who got the 2008 Nobel Prize for showing that viruses can cause certain cancers. He used the HeLa cell line to discover that a virus, which is called HPV-18, human papillomavirus 18, is linked to cervical cancer. And this discovery was the basis of designing of a vaccine against cervical cancer, and that has saved many lives. Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn, she won the 2009 Nobel for her discovery on what determines the longevity in cells, and her research has actually, with HeLa cells, helped to develop cancer therapeutics. That has again saved many lives. Jonas Salk, he didn't get the Nobel Prize, but he made the polio vaccine. What he did, he made a factory of HeLa cells and cultured, because viruses cannot grow other than cells, so he cultured the viruses in that HeLa cells, the polio virus, made an enormous collection of the viruses, and eventually made the polio vaccine. And what has happened is that we have about 99% eradication of polio. So Henrietta Lacks was actually forgotten for many, many years. But it was in the year 2010 that Rebecca Skloot, a journalist, found her by going through so many documents that were available with the Baltimore Hospital. And her story then made headlines 60 years after Henrietta's death about ethical issues as cells from her were used without her permission, without her family's permission. So her statues now stand in many places, actually remembering her for her contribution to medical research, for her cells contribution, which she did not know about. But her family has received a compensation of undisclosed amount from a company, and there are many more companies which are lining up to do that. But the universities who used her cells did not sell her cells, so they actually used it for research. So this is the story of Henrietta Lacks, and this is to show that how a cell can be so valuable, and it's been there for 73 years now. The cell must have been modified by mutations and all, but those cells are still growing. There is only one other kidney cell line that has had a long life, but Henrietta's cells are very unique. So now if our cells have the power to save us. How is that? Now when our cells are sick, we get disease, then the disease is diagnosed, drugs are given, germs are killed, and recovery is there. So this happened after Alexander Fleming discovered the antibiotics in 1935 or so, and got the Nobel Prize in 1945 for discovery of the antibiotics. But antibiotics started having problems because there are about millions and millions of signaling pathways in the cell that need to be interfered with if antibiotics have to act. So we can only target 200 to 250. So that leaves a gap. Antibiotic resistance, you must be reading in papers, it has become such a problem because antibiotics are used so indiscriminately. And chemotherapy, radiotherapy may or may not work in cancers, in tumors. And so thoughts about using cell therapy as a treatment originated. Cell therapy. Now what is cell therapy? Cell therapy is the transfer of a specific cell type or types into a person to treat or prevent a disease. Cells can be own cells or from another person, a matching, but the person has to match. Common disorders treated with cellular therapies include cancers of the blood, the bone marrow, cancers of the lymphatic system, and plasma cell disorders. Now, kinds of cell therapy, if we look at, that is stem cell based cell therapy. Stem cells, you've heard about stem cells. It can be cancer stem cells, pluripotent stem cells, adult stem cells, and non-stem cell based therapy, the immune cells and the non-immune cells. I will take just two examples of immune cells, how they have been used to treat our diseases. The first example before doing that, I wanted to show is the first cell therapy that happened historically, which is very important. And that is Donald Thomas. And this happened when a lot of leukemia were happening after the bombs were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So Donald Thomas actually in 1957 made a bone marrow transplant from a twin to the other part of the twin, and saved her from blood cancer. So this was actually transferring healthy blood-forming cells from a healthy donor to a patient who is not producing enough blood cells. So this was the first therapy. 10 years later, he did a therapy for the matching person. He got the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine because this saved many lives. Sorry about this. So this was the first cell therapy. Historically, this is very important. Now, I was saying about immune cells. During COVID-19, we have heard about immunity. Now, what is immunity? We have got the idea that immunity is something that keeps us free of diseases because the immune system works for us. So we have many soldiers of the immune system. These are the variety of cells: monocytes, macrophages, mast cells, dendritic cells, natural killer cells, etc. I'm going to use the example of a T cell to show you how T cells have been used to cure diseases. So what? It's not changing. Hello? Change channel. It's not changing. So I've got it. So how T cell soldiers kill, it is very important to know how they kill the invader cells. Now what a T cell actually does is it roams around in our blood and goes into the tissues as well, and it has receptors on its surface which latches onto a cancer cell or a cell which is infected by a virus or a bacteria and makes holes on them using an enzyme, and then puts a toxin inside the cell. And this stress actually initiates the cell to initiate a programmed cell death, and it dies a neat form of death. So this is how T cells actually kill, and they are called cytotoxic T cells. So this was used as a basis to design a therapy which is called a CAR T cell therapy, where the T cell is actually given a lot of receptors which is called CAR, chimeric antigen receptor. They are engineered to produce these receptors on their surface. Then they're propagated, and when they're flowing in the blood, they would recognize these cells with more efficiency because now they have more receptors on their surface, and they will kill the cells, kill the cancer cells. So this cell therapy, which is called CAR T cell therapy, is done how? The patient T cells are actually collected. You see, there is no rejection here because own cells are being used. So the T cells are collected, they are then reprogrammed to produce this receptor, and that is done by a lentivirus. It's a technical term I'm using, and these receptors are now expressed on the cells. Now we need a more amount of cells to do to inject into a person. So these cells are expanded in the test tube, and then they are injected into the patient, where in his or her bloodstream these cancer cells are killed by the CAR T cells. So this is one example, and this is Emily Whitehead, who was a 6-year-old when she had a recurrence of acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and after over 16 months of chemotherapy treatments, her parents were told that she will live no longer. All options are used up. So she was enrolled in a trial which was never tried on a child before, which is the CAR T cell therapy. And she went surprisingly into remission. And now she is back as a freshman in college. She has been free for cancer for 11 years now. So the CAR T cell therapy is now being used in children as well. And the doctor who invented the therapy that was used for Emily Whitehead is Dr. Carl Jung, who did this therapy at the University of Pennsylvania Medical School. So the good news is also that Dr. V.K. Gupta is the first Indian patient to be free of cancer by this method. But this method was incredibly expensive. If it is done in the US, it was 4 crores, the cost. But this was done for 40 lakhs, and doctors are trying to bring down more and more the cost of this treatment. So he is now cancer-free, and this treatment, which was a collaboration between Bombay IIT and Tata Memorial Center, was released by the President of India. This is there is also Biocon, Kiran Majumdar Shaw's pharmaceutical company. Biocon, in collaboration with Dr. Siddhartha Mukherjee, oncologist from USA, is also trying to bring down the cost of this treatment in India. And so this is now being used, and the efficacy is that for ALL, 68 to 93% efficacy is there. For chronic lymphocytic leukemia, 57 to 71%. This varies actually. These are figures that are available in the reports. And B-cell lymphoma, 64 to 86%. Now really future work needs to be done not only for reducing the cost, but reducing some of the side effects that do happen with such treatments. But this is a treatment that is being refined more and more, and from the day one, we have come a long way. Now, I will take one more example of an immune cell which is being used, which is the NK cell, or the natural killer cell. You can see by the name, the natural killer cell is something which is weaponized by the body to recognize a foreign cell, to recognize an infected cell, and kill them. And they do it much easier than T cells, because T cells have certain restrictions which they don't have. So using the NK cell, again they have used this CAR receptor which I talked about in the T cell, where they make the CAR NK cell. These cells latch on to the tumor cells, and then they again kill the tumor cells in the same way that the CAR T cells did, by creating pores, injecting a toxin, and initiating the programmed cell death in that particular cell. So because cancer is increasing so much, the global natural killer cell therapeutics market was valued at more than 1,000 million in 2018, and is projected to reach more than 5,000 million by 2016. Similarly, CAR T cell therapy is also having a huge market. Now, magic of us living is also partly dependent on our reservoirs. What are our reservoirs? They are our stem cells. So stem cells are a very special type of cells that are able to make more cells like themselves. They can become other cells too. So our stem cells, therefore, are valuable resources for our health. all of our organs have a certain amount of certain amount of stem cells, and the blood is where most of the stem cells are there. And they can develop into many different cell types in the body during early life and growth. Now stem cells are found pluripotent stem cell. Pluripotent stem cells means cells who can differentiate into other cell types, are derived from the cord blood, which is the cord that connects the embryo to the mother. That has a very rich source of stem cells, and they are used for making with matching donors, making the cells and injecting into the body for repair. So the adult stem cells are found in a tissue or organ. They differentiate to yield specialized cell types of that tissue. For example, kidney cells into kidney tissue, or heart cells into heart. So they are called adult stem cells. But adult stem cells can also be reprogrammed now. So that has been done by Shinya Yamanaka, who got the Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine in 2012, where mature cells can be reprogrammed to become pluripotent. All our cells have differentiated, so they cannot go back in time. But what he has done, he has actually turned the clock back. But this is a very young discovery, so clinical applications is still not there now. Now, stem cells have been used from the source of cord bloods, from the other sources, to treat several diseases like multiple sclerosis, heart attack, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, arthritis, Crohn's disease, and many of these are in trial. They are not yet approved for everyday use. But what is interesting, I thought, was stem cells for the knee, because there are so many problems with knee replacement. So the body, we know that, is efficient at healing itself. Broken bones, cuts are easily repaired. So for knee osteoarthritis, what doctors are doing is taking good cells from a different place in the knee, propagating them in test tube and re-injecting them back. There can be stem cells grown from other sources also, and injecting back for growing our cartilage, growing the cells that are causing the problems. So this is a promising procedure that's going to come in future. So the lessons are that there are trillions of cells in our body that divide and die to keep us alive. Deregulation of cell death causes deformities and diseases. Stem cells are the backup in times of requirement. Our cells are our wealth, as they can provide treatment options. This field of cell therapy is actually booming. There are side effects that are being worked out. There are costs which are being worked out. But cell therapy is a boon that has come. And according to Siddharth Mukherjee, oncologist whom I referred to, that this is going to be the century of the cell. So, cells are now in the forefront of many subjects. Varied disciplines are looking at cells: physics, chemistry, engineering. They're looking at how cells work, what can be done to the cell from their perspective. And scientists, historians, and philosophers are also looking at cell functioning, and concepts are being developed, theories are being given. Methods, technologies are evolving very rapidly. Now there is a technique called single cell sequencing. So you can actually study a single cell, which was very, very difficult, but technology had to come. Machines have come now. They can now study individual cells, individual cellular composition of proteins, enzymes, whatever. The DNA of the cell, of a single cell. So this is very important, and cell biology is at the center of many things now. Now this is actually not a cell. I'm jumping from a cell to our galaxy. this is actually a dying star. This will become a white dwarf. And the materials, once it becomes materials that will come, the carbon of our DNA, the calcium in our bones, they're all coming from the stars. And what I wanted to say here is that in the universe, the stars die in about millions of years. This is the Helix Nebula. That's a photograph by one of our again, technology has come, James Webb Telescope. And cells die in a matter of hours, days, and years. So in the universe, in the cosmos, there is a finite rule that the stars have to die sometime, and most of the stars die. We are seeing dying stars so much by these telescopes. And the cells in our own body dies, and in our lifetime recycles the dead cells. So this is a phenomenon just I wanted to say that happens to us. Now this is all I had to say. Thank you very much. We know so much, yet we do not know enough. So that is where I finish my lecture. Thank you very much.